Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Sean, and if I'm being honest, my marriage of 18 years did not start the way most people imagine. When I look back at those early years, especially the first two, all I see is confusion and constant tension. We didn't have that peaceful newlywed phase people talk about. Instead, we were always arguing, sometimes over serious things, but most of the time over issues so minor that I can't even remember what started them. It felt like we were walking on a floor of glass. Any step could spark a misunderstanding. I'd go to work trying to focus, but in the back of my mind, I always wondered what kind of mood I'd be walking into when I got home. Most evenings, I came back mentally drained, hoping for a quiet night, but things never went that way. The moment I stepped inside, something would set her off. She wanted to be in charge of everything. Even small decisions could turn into hours-long debates. For someone like me, who believed marriage required teamwork, it was frustrating to feel managed rather than partnered. Another thing that made those arguments worse was how close her family lived to us. They were only about 30 minutes away, which made it easy for her to run there whenever we fought. And she didn't hesitate. The moment our voices got loud or she felt offended, she would grab a small bag, almost like it was already packed, and walk out. She wouldn't say when she'd be back. She wouldn't discuss the issue. She just left. I'd find myself alone in the house, wondering what I could have done differently. The cycle repeated, so often that I could almost predict it. Even with all this, I stayed committed. I saw what we were facing as rough patches, since we were both young and stubborn, still trying to understand each other, and that if I just stayed focused and responsible, things would eventually calm down. I wanted to believe that the chaos was temporary, and we would grow out of it. At that stage of my life, showing love meant enduring whatever came, even if it drained me piece by piece. After 2 long, stressful years of my wife and me clashing, she told me she was pregnant one Saturday morning. Something inside me just loosened. I felt this massive wave of relief, like life was finally throwing us a lifeline. I told myself that maybe this baby was the blessing we needed, something bigger than both of us that could pull us out of all that pointless fighting. And as days turned into weeks, I began to see fundamental changes in my wife. The sharp tone she usually had softened. She wasn't storming off to her parents' house every time we disagreed. She talked more gently, listened more, and we had moments of peace that I genuinely didn't think we were capable of before. It felt like the pregnancy grounded her. And somehow it grounded me too. Becoming an expectant father did something to me that I couldn't ignore. I started working harder, staying longer hours, saving more, and cutting back on things I used to waste money on. I wanted to make sure that by the time our baby arrived, we had everything we needed. Baby clothes, a safe crib, a clean room, a comfortable home. I didn't come from a family where fathers stepped up like that, so I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't continue that cycle. I imagined this little family of 3 growing together, learning together, and I held on to that picture every day. As time goes on, it gradually becomes my driving force. When our daughter was born, it changed my world completely. She was tiny but full of life. As she grew older, I noticed she looked more and more like my wife's mother. It wasn't something that bothered me. In fact, I used to joke about it, telling my wife that her side of the family's genes were strong. We laughed about it all the time, and it never once crossed my mind that she might not be mine. I had no reason to doubt anything. To me, she was the best miracle that ever happened to my marriage. Her presence brought peace into our home, even on the days when my wife slipped back into old habits of wanting control or picking fights. The baby changed the tone of everything. The late-night feedings, the diaper changes, the little giggles, the first steps. All of it made me feel like I finally had a purpose that went beyond just paying bills and trying to keep the house running. I put my whole heart, my time, and every extra dollar I made into giving her the best life I could. I wanted her to feel safe, loved, and supported in every way. Time moves faster than we expect. One moment, I was teaching my daughter how to hold a spoon properly, and the next, she was talking about driving lessons. Everything in our home felt stable during those years leading up to her 16th birthday. There were the usual family disagreements and everyday stress, but nothing serious enough to shake the foundation of what I believed was a strong home. I thought we had finally grown into a peaceful family rhythm, something I had prayed for since the day she was born. As her 16th birthday approached, I noticed my wife's excitement building. She came to me one evening with this bright idea to throw a surprise birthday party for our daughter. She explained how 16 was a big deal, especially for a girl, and how it would mean so much to her if we made the day special. I agreed without thinking twice. Celebrating our daughter was never a burden to me. In fact, planning something big for her felt almost like a reward for all the years I had poured into being her father. It felt like the perfect chance to show her how proud I was of the young woman she was becoming. My wife and I got straight into planning. I hired an event planner because I wanted everything to look neat and organized, not like something I threw together in a rush. My wife handled the guest list and the small personal touches that only a mother would think of. We talked late into the night about cake flavors, color themes, and what kind of music she would enjoy. For the first time in a while, it felt like we were working as a real team. We whispered around the house, hid receipts, and pretended nothing unusual was happening, so our daughter wouldn't suspect a thing. Keeping the secret felt exciting. I imagined my daughter walking into the party, surprised, smiling, maybe even crying a little from happiness. That picture alone made all the planning worth it. I felt good. It was one of those moments when I looked at myself and thought, yeah, this is what being a father is all about. It felt like all the sacrifices, the long work hours, and the arguments I swallowed for the sake of peace were finally leading to something beautiful. For once, I felt sure I was doing everything right. About a week before my daughter's 16th birthday, a phone call that changed everything. I had just gotten home from work, still wearing my tie, planning to take a shower and maybe eat something light before going through the final details of the surprise party with my wife. Then my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months, my wife's former best friend. She was a woman who used to be in our house so often. She would spend hours with my wife, sometimes staying so late that I would meet her when I returned from work. We were not close, not even a little, but she was familiar. So, when she disappeared from our lives all of a sudden, it didn't go unnoticed. I asked my wife once, casually, why her friend had stopped coming around, and she told me the woman had become too jealous and hateful, too toxic to keep close. She spoke with such confidence that I didn't question her. I actually supported the decision because I thought it showed maturity, that my wife was cutting off evil influences. But when her call came that evening, I felt a sharp confusion settle in my chest. Why would she be calling me? We never had a one-on-one conversation, not even once. It didn't make sense. I let the phone ring out. I told myself it wasn't my business. The last thing I wanted was to get dragged into old friendship drama between two women with a complicated history. I spent years walking on eggshells, trying not to say or do anything that would spark an argument with my wife. So getting involved with her former best friend was the last thing I needed. The second call came in not long after. I stared at the phone, then chose not to answer. Something in me resisted it. I didn't want to be pulled into anything that could bring more problems into my home. But then my phone buzzed with a message, and when I opened it, I was surprised by what she sent. The text wasn't long, but it was sharp and direct. She said she didn't know why I wasn't answering her calls, and that I needed to talk to her before I continued being a fool and raising another man's child. I remember reading that line again and again. This statement wasn't something people joked about. It wasn't something you said just because you wanted to hurt someone. The message shook me so hard that I didn't even think twice before calling her back. The moment she picked up, she didn't bother with greetings or small talk. She went straight to the point like someone ripping a bandage off an open wound. She told me that the girl I had loved and raised all my life wasn't my biological daughter. I tried to interrupt her, tried to ask why she was saying something so serious without proof. I even accused her of trying to cause trouble because of whatever fight she had with my wife. But she didn't care about my questions or my confusion. She cut me off mid-sentence, told me to get a DNA test before arguing, and then ended the call just like that. No explanation. No warning. Nothing. When the line went dead, I just stood there holding my phone, unable to think clearly. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. One moment, I was preparing for my daughter's 16th birthday, excited and proud, and the next, I was questioning something I never imagined would be in doubt. My mood changed instantly. I couldn't hide it, not even for myself. The rest of that evening moved in slow motion. Food didn't taste the same. Conversations around me sounded far away. My mind kept circling back to the same painful thought. What if everything I believed about my family wasn't true? In the days that followed, I was utterly lost and couldn't think properly. I kept switching between confusion, anger, and fear. One moment, I would tell myself that my wife's former best friend was lying, and the next, I would replay her words over and over, wondering why she would say something like that if it weren't true. It felt like my mind refused to rest as I couldn't focus on anything. Not work, not conversations, not even food. At night, I hardly slept. I kept tossing and turning, thinking about my daughter and all the years I had raised her. I looked back on old memories and wondered if I had missed something. It was painful even to imagine that she might not be mine, but the doubt kept growing. After almost a week of living like this, I knew I couldn't continue pretending everything was fine. 6 days before her birthday, I finally decided to take the DNA test. Making that choice hurt me, but not knowing the truth was hurting me even more. When I went into my daughter's room to collect the hair sample, her hairbrush was sitting on the dresser like it always was. I picked it up slowly and removed a few strands of hair stuck in the bristles. I placed them in the small envelope the lab gave me and sealed it. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell anyone. I just drove to the testing center, handed it over, and left. It felt like I was carrying a secret that could break my entire family. After I submitted the test, my days no longer felt normal. Everything seemed dull, and I moved through each day without energy. I was helping my wife plan the surprise party, nodding along and agreeing to ideas, but inside I felt nothing. I wasn't excited, and I couldn't pretend to be happy. I woke up, worked, and interacted with people, but it all felt empty. My mind stayed stuck on the test, and the fear of what the result might say stayed with me every second. It was like carrying a heavy weight that never left. When I sent off that DNA sample, I was told it would take 7 days to get the results. So I pushed the test to the back of my mind and tried to focus on the birthday plans we had spent weeks putting together. We surprised my daughter on her birthday. She came home from school to a decorated house. With music playing, my wife's family had arrived earlier, and people were already laughing and settling into that warm, celebratory mood. I was doing my best to smile and keep everything running smoothly, even though I felt this tightness in my chest that refused to loosen. Then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any more guests, so I assumed it was another delivery for the party. But when I opened the door and saw a plain envelope with my name on it, I couldn't adequately describe how I felt. My first thought was that it couldn't be the DNA results. It was too early. But it was actually the DNA. I didn't want anyone to see me, so I stepped away from the noise, away from the balloons and the music, and the voices of people who had no idea that my whole world was balancing on the edge of a secret I never asked for. I opened the envelope quietly, almost hoping it would be something else, anything else. But the moment my eyes landed on the words 0% paternal match, I felt empty inside. My chest tightened, so hard I thought I was going to collapse. My brain refused to accept that these words were real. I just stood there holding that paper while everything around me faded into the background. 16 years of loving, providing, protecting, sacrificing all came down to a single sheet of paper telling me I wasn't who I believed I was. I didn't cry, but my heart was filled with anger. I didn't know what to do first, but I knew I needed answers, and I needed them right away. I couldn't keep that truth sitting inside me without exploding. That's when I decided to confront someone who might know the truth. My wife was surrounded by relatives, smiling and talking, so approaching her right then felt impossible. Instead, my eyes landed on her sister standing in the hallway. She was someone who always moved close to my wife, someone who seemed to know everything happening in her life, even things I didn't know. If there were a person who would slip or react honestly, it would be her. So I walked toward her and, without bothering with greetings or small talk. I simply pulled her aside and handed her the document. She looked down at it slowly. But the moment her eyes reached the 0% paternal match, her whole face changed. I watched every emotion cross her expression, then that unmistakable look of guilt. A guilt you can't mask, even if you try. She didn't deny anything. She just froze, and that silence told me more than any explanation ever could. I asked her directly, my voice low but steady, whether she had known that I'd been raising another man's child for 16 years. She tried to respond, but her voice cracked. She stammered out a few shaky words, trying to create excuses, trying to soften what she clearly knew was the truth. She kept talking about how it was a long time ago, how what mattered now was that I'd always loved the girl, and how the past shouldn't destroy everything we had built. She was trying to make betrayal sound reasonable, trying to make deception sound like a slight misunderstanding. But her reactions made everything crystal clear. They had known. Her entire family had known. And for 16 years, they had allowed me to carry responsibilities, sacrifices, and emotional weight built on a lie. They had watched me love that child with my whole heart. They had enjoyed the benefits of my hard work and stability. And none of them ever cared enough to tell me the truth. That realization didn't just hurt. It broke something inside me. After standing there with my wife's sister and realizing her entire family had been part of the secret, I didn't need more conversations, more excuses, or more attempts to twist the story into something easier to accept. I just knew I couldn't stand there and pretend to be part of that celebration any longer. With the DNA paper still warm from where her sister had held it, I turned around and started walking back toward the living room. As I stepped back into the room, people were laughing, clinking glasses, singing along, and taking pictures. Balloons were hanging everywhere. The cake was already on display, and my daughter, whom I now wasn't sure how to see, was smiling with her friends. It was supposed to be a happy day, but I felt like an outsider looking in, like I didn't belong in that life anymore. My wife was seated at one of the decorated tables, smiling, turning around to greet a relative who had just arrived. I walked straight to her, and she looked up at me with this light, happy expression, utterly unaware of what was coming. I simply placed the DNA results in front of her, right on the table, between her plate and her drink, without saying a single word. At first, she didn't understand what I was doing. She frowned slightly, probably thinking it was some bill or receipt from the planner. But when she opened it, when her eyes landed on those words, 0% paternal match, her entire face collapsed. Her smile died instantly. She couldn't believe she was reading what she was reading. As I stepped back from the table and walked away, the murmurs began as people saw the expression on her face and realized something was wrong. Her family members started glancing at me, then at the paper, then whispering among themselves. I walked straight out of the house, got into my car, and shut the door. The second the engine started and I drove off, my phone began buzzing with calls. After ringing without picking up, some messages came in one after another. But I didn't pick up. I couldn't. Every time the phone lit up with her name or her family's name, it felt like someone pressing a finger into an open wound. After leaving the house, I didn't have the mental space to think about going anywhere familiar. I drove for a long time without a plan, stopping only when I felt I could finally breathe. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't return home, not after what I had just learned. I needed distance to understand what the last 16 years of my life had really been. So I stayed away. One night turned into several, and several turned into 2 whole weeks. During that time, my phone never stopped buzzing. My wife called repeatedly and sent message after message. Her tone shifted constantly, sometimes apologetic, sometimes defensive, sometimes accusing me of abandoning the family. She insisted that the past didn't matter, because I had always loved the child. But no matter what she said, I couldn't bring myself to respond. There was nothing she could say that would make the situation reasonable. By the time I returned, I had made my decision. I didn't go back to talk or to negotiate. I went back to serve my wife with divorce papers and pack the rest of my stuff in the house. When she opened the door that day and saw me, she was expecting a conversation, but I wasn't interested in rehashing anything. I handed her the documents and walked in to get my personal belongings. Ending the marriage was straightforward emotionally, but legally, everything became complicated very quickly. Trying to remove myself as the child's legal father became a long and exhausting process. I explained clearly, through lawyers, through documentation, that I had been deceived for 16 years. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I simply didn't want to continue living under a false identity that someone else created for me. But the court viewed the situation differently. Every hearing focused on the child's well-being and the importance of maintaining her lifestyle. The deception, the financial burden, the emotional impact. None of it seemed to carry much weight. In the end, the marriage was dissolved, but the judge ruled that I still had financial responsibility until the child turned 18. It felt unfair, but I had no real power to change it. The court was concerned about the child's stability, not the circumstances that led to the truth being hidden. I accepted the ruling because dragging the case out wouldn't have changed much and would have only kept me tied to a life I was trying to leave behind. Once everything was finalized, I was no longer legally tied to my wife. When everything was finally over, and I had enough distance to think clearly, I started asking myself what I was supposed to learn from all of this. For a long time, I blamed myself for not noticing anything sooner, but the truth is that trust makes you see people the way you hope they are, not the way they actually behave. I trusted my wife completely. I trusted her family. I trusted the picture of my life that I thought we were building together. But trust without awareness isn't strength, it's risk. And when you place it in the wrong hands, it can be used against you without you even realizing it. Looking back, I understand how damaging secrets can be, especially in a marriage. They don't stay quiet forever. They sit in the background, changing how someone looks at you, how they act around you, and how they treat the relationship. Even if the truth never slips out, the behavior around that secret always does. I didn't know the whole story of my marriage until years later, but the cracks were there from the beginning. I just convinced myself they didn't matter because I wanted peace more than I wanted clarity. Another thing I want anyone listening to understand is that love is essential, but it cannot replace self-respect. Loving someone deeply doesn't mean you should ignore your own boundaries or silence your instincts. It also doesn't mean you have to stay in situations where you're being taken advantage of. I spent 16 years believing I was building a family, but I was the only one doing it honestly. You can give everything you have to someone, but if you let them cross your boundaries because you're afraid of conflict, you end up losing parts of yourself along the way. Finally, walking away wasn't just about leaving my wife. It was about stepping out of a life that was built on information I never had the chance to consent to. It was about reclaiming my decisions, my identity, and my future from a lie that stretched across 16 years. It wasn't easy or clean, but it was necessary. And if there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's that protecting your mental well-being is not selfish, it's survival. Sometimes the hardest choice is the only one that gives you your life back.